So I guess we can kind of stay in sports. Um, I guess, but actually, before we even get there, let's talk about uh, Mr. Houston, JSU's finest. Because we getting ready to switch over to Dion. But before we get there, how do you think him breaking that sack record in the first 6 games of anybody's career? How do you think that type of play makes Jackson State look or makes Dion look?
Oh man, it makes them look amazing, and what it also does is it makes you think that, hey, you know what? Maybe we do need to look at HBCUs a little bit more as far as being somebody, as far as picking talent is concerned. People from HBCUs, just because they go there, don't mean that they're bad players. In my opinion, it means that they were just overlooked, and HBCUs are just where HBCU is just where they went, because of course HBCUs aren't known for sports for the most part, right? As band and those other things, they're not really known for sports,
right?
And because that's the case, then you don't look at it like that until somebody like a Deion Sanders goes over there and knows talent, not only from playing in the league for so long, but being an analyst, and then going back to coaching in general. So I think you want to look at those things before you make a snap judgment and say, oh, well, it's really because he didn't play a lot of good talent. No, you really need to look at the player and not necessarily who he played against to understand who you got. And that is a thing that Brad Holmes does extremely well. And that's why you get players out of Oklahoma State in Rodrigo, who we call Rodrigo, right?
Rodrigo.
Undrafted free agents like a Jerry Jacobs, who essentially has become our #1 starting cornerback over somebody like Jeff Okuda, who went to Ohio State. Right?
Yeah. He finds talent,
like
man.
That.
He finds talent,
right? And they're in places where most people don't look. So they think of him as, oh, man, he's one of the best talent evaluators and finders. Is in reality, they're doing the same thing that these other players are doing, and maybe even better. Is just because of the competition that they face.
Right.
And so that's what you have to look at when you're drafting players and things like that. So, I really think it does put a spotlight on HBCUs now.
I can see that. And if you look at all the hires, Ed Reed, he just went to Bethune-Cookman. It seems like that's the new. I won't say the new way, but it seems like that is a pipeline to Power 5 schools or Power 5 jobs, and if that's what it takes, man, that's what it takes. But it seems like Prime started a trend. Eddie George, he went. Like I said, Ed Reed, he just got hired. So hopefully that's the move, man. Ex-players, if they can't get jobs in the NFL, can't get jobs in Power 5, don't beg. Just go to a HBCU. Keep the movement going. Hopefully they can stay and build it. And eventually, if Prime would have stayed, and this is the next topic, so we can kind of switch over. If Prime would have stayed, you know what I mean. If he would have stayed in Jackson State for, let's say, two recruiting classes, freshman to senior years, so 6 to 8 years. If he would have stayed 6 to 8 years, man, I think he could have competed with some Power 5 schools, like in actual ball games, not just recruiting. He was winning a lot of recruiting battles. He was flipping recruits from Florida State and Alabama and all that. I think in 6 to 8 years with a couple 4 recruiting classes, I think he could have competed with a lot of Power 5 schools. And that's just because how quick he was able to get that done. Second year they lost 2 games. Last year they lost 1 game. So it's like he turned them around real quick. And
sure did.
If he had a full, like I said, 2 recruiting classes, freshman or senior year, man, ain't no telling what they could have did. Ain't no telling. But I get the move. It took me a while to understand it. It did sting a little bit just because, Prime has been my guy since he was a 49er, So it's like when I see him making an impact in HBCUs, I used to want to go to Grambling, so I'm well familiar with HBCUs. It's like, okay, yeah, we got one. Okay, Prime. and then he left, and it's like, ah, man. But you know, he took his sons with him. You know, he wants them to, you know, go pro. They got a better chance to do it at Colorado, especially if he builds as quick as he did at, you know, Jackson State. Shadur's already a Heisman hopeful in some people's list, so, you know, I mean, I get it. I get it. He had to do what, you know, was best for him and his, but it would have been really nice to see, you know, what he could have did in 6 to 8 years. But hey, you got to do what you got to do.